As the imperial chess pieces began to move towards war in the spring and early summer of 1914, Sunderland responded accordingly, its 151,000 townspeople busying themselves, preparing for what might come. Sunderland's final account when the war was over would read that of those 151,000 residents, 18,000 would serve their king, and 1/3 of those become casualties.
The only way that people would have actually found out what was going on was the local newspapers or by word of mouth. So there was lots of issues of the Sunderland Daily Echo, and people queued to get the new copies of the paper to try and find out what was happening. The local territorial regiment, the 7th DLI, was on manoeuvres down in Conway in Wales when war was declared, and immediately they trained up to Sunderland and went down to the seafront, where right along the seafront, from where Bede's monument is today right down to Whitburn, trenches were dug and artillery brought down to defend the coast.
Sunderland is this hugely important industrial centre. This is the town that builds the ships for the merchant navy. It provides the coal that powers industry, provides the coal that powers the Royal Navy, which is essential to the defence of these islands. Sunderland's a very important industrial centre right on the North Sea coast. This town is vulnerable, and it's a potential target for a German attack.
Of Sunderland's sons who went off to the Great War, some would survive with awards and honour, others would simply disappear, while many more would return to the Weir destined to carry their daily burden with the added weight of their experiences. Born to an affluent local family, Army Doctor Lieutenant George Allen Mailing was destined to survive the war with great honour, receiving the Victoria Cross for his heroism. Mailing treated more than 300 men over a 24-hour period in 1915 during the Battle of Loos in France. Under heavy shell and gunfire, he repeatedly placed himself in great danger to attend to the wounded, continuing even after he'd been blown senseless by a nearby explosion, one that killed several of his companions. As the town of Sunderland prepared for war and became accustomed to its exposed situation on the northeast coast, so it evolved to accommodate these extraordinary circumstances. The dockyards had never been busier, but contrarily, at times during the war, production dropped. Not from any lack of vigour, but from the drain on skilled men that the ever-inflating armed forces required.
There was a great shortage of workers because in World War II there was restriction on who could join up, but in World War I there was no restriction, and what happened is a lot of the lads from the shipyards and the mines and these sort of places joined up, seeing that there would be some sort of adventure. Eventually a lot of those places were taken by women, and certainly in the shipyards and throughout the town, women took the place of those who'd actually gone abroad to fight.
The 16 shipyards of the Weir churned out 360 vessels during the war, mostly merchant ships, but also destroyers, gunboats and landing craft.
On the military side, or the naval side, Doxford's produced 21 torpedo boat destroyers during that period. These are very small ships, about 1,000 tons, but needed because torpedo boats themselves could come very quickly up to a bigger ship, let loose a torpedo and cause damage.
HMS Opal, built by Doxford's, was launched in 1915 and is representative of the class of torpedo boat destroyers built on the river. Opal saw action in the war's largest naval engagement, the Battle of Jutland, in 1916, where the British and German fleets clashed violently off the coast of Denmark. In 1918, after Opal had returned to her patrol duties in the North Sea, she had the misfortune to run aground off the Orkney Islands, along with her sister ship, HMS Narborough. In the violent storm, both vessels foundered. with the loss of 188 lives. On the night of the 1st of April 1916, a new kind of warfare visited the Weir, when German Imperial Navy Zeppelin L-11 crossed the coast. Initially destined for more southerly targets, events would push the airship further north, and ultimately to Sunderland. After leaving his base at Nordholz on the North German coast at lunchtime, the L-11 commander, Captain Schutz, guided his vessel across the sea. Strong winds pushed the Zeppelin north, and while Tyneside would have been a tempting target for the new captain, a recent attack meant that the Tyne was now very well defended, and so the decision was made to deliver the explosive payload over the softer target of Sunderland.
In 1915, early 1915, the German High Command decided to use Zeppelins, which had previously just been a contribution to flight. They were invented from 1910 onwards in Count Zeppelin's factory in Germany, but the Germans saw this as a potential war weapon, and they started a series of raids on England. On the 1st of April 1916, it was Sunderland's turn to receive a visit.
Captain Schutz and his crew were responsible for bombing the goods yard of Monk Weymouth Station, Thomas Street School, and damaging St Benet's Church. Moving on, the attack destroyed a tram and a house in North Bridge Street. Sally Ann Holmes, the conductress, was injured and her inspector killed. In all, the raid of Zeppelin L-11 resulted in the loss of 22 lives, with 25 more seriously injured. As morning dawned and the cost of the raid was accounted, it became apparent just how vulnerable Sunderland was, particularly to this new type of war. The response was threefold: prepare for early detection of a potential raid, arm the area from the ground with anti-aircraft guns, and finally, prepare to take on the enemy face to face. In an age before radar, the early warning solution was innovative in its concept, if not particularly efficient. On Namey Hill off Newcastle Road in Fulwell, a concrete acoustic mirror was constructed. As enemy aircraft approached the coast, the mirror would amplify the sound of their engines by bouncing the sound waves off the concrete mirror, concentrating them towards a microphone placed in front of the dish. These types of acoustic mirror popped up around the British coastline, but were doomed to be inefficient, as operators found it hard to distinguish between aircraft and ship engines.
Well, in 1915, the Germans started using Zeppelins against the northeast, so they formed home defence squadrons from the Royal Flying Corps, and number 36 Squadron was the home defence squadron for the northeast of England. Originally formed at Newcastle with a base at Cramlington. Then in 1916 they opened a base at Hilton. The idea being that they would have detached flights along the northeast, and if they detected Zeppelins coming in over the coast, they could send off aircraft to intercept them at various points. Hilton then eventually became the main headquarters for 36 Squadron and the main flying base for them, and at the end of the war was the only base they were still using. With the northeast, probably with all the industry, there was a lot of technically minded and advanced minded youngsters about, and over 5,000 people joined the Royal Flying Corps, Royal Naval Air Service during the First World War from Northumberland and Durham.
In March 1918, Sergeant Arthur John Joyce, while on routine night patrol, found himself in difficulty and cut off from Usworth Airfield due to mist. As he approached the hills of County Durham, Sergeant Joyce decided it would be prudent to attempt to land. He circled Pontop Pike 3 times before eventually landing on Loud Bank at Anfield Plain. This landing site was far from ideal, and Sergeant Joyce's aircraft turned over and exploded, killing him instantly. A memorial nearby commemorates this tragic event.
Trench warfare really has descended into a bit of a stalemate. Nobody can deliver the knockout blow. So at the very end of 1916, the German tactics change, and from 1917 they pursue a policy of unrestricted submarine warfare. And that means that any ship, any merchant vessel in the waters surrounding Britain is fair game and will be attacked without warning.
One particular event that took place was UC-32. This was a pretty newly constructed submarine, so it was a good quality build in 1916, but in February 1917 it was laying mines just off the pier at Sunderland. It had on board 14 large mines, and as the first mine was being laid, a mistake caused an explosion, and on board there were 31 men, and 3 of them survived. The submarine blew up into 3 parts, but the middle part with the conning tower was blown to one side, and 3 of the crew survived, amazingly. They were picked up then by the local navy, but that vessel is still 14 metres under the sea, just off the pier at Sunderland.
While the Weir defended itself and sent its sons off to war, those left at home found themselves with new responsibilities. Women replaced men, taking on duties in shipbuilding and heavy industry, along with caring for the returning wounded in voluntary aid detachments. To ease the pressure on the Sunderland Royal Infirmary, it had been decided before the war that Jeffrey Hall and Hamerton House would be used as convalescence homes. With the war, this pressure increased, and the Royalty Theatre, Bede Tower, Ashburn House, Harrington Hall and St Gabriel's Church all opened their doors to receive the nation's wounded, swelling the ranks of the voluntary aid detachments. Between 1914 and the armistice in 1918, Sunderland sent 18,000 men to war. The river's 16 yards launched 360 ships, and it survived attack from air and sea. The 19th of July 1919 was named as a National Peace Day celebration, and Sunderland, along with the rest of the nation, gave thanks for the survival of those that had returned, and attempted to come to terms with the loss of those that would never be seen again.
It was a very, very large procession went through the town. There was representatives from each of the countries that had taken part. Often these were schoolboys taking the part of Australians and Romanians and the other countries, and went right through the town, round the main bits of it, Hilton Road, Chester Road, right round. The children were given a medal. It was called the Mayor's Medal, and apparently it was made from the very cheapest material that could possibly have been produced, and there isn't actually a lot of them still around because it was such a cheap piece of metal.
Over the course of the last century, Sunderland, along with the rest of the world, weathered another global war, once again sending its sons dutifully off in the cause of freedom. The town has fought through economic depression and massive industrial change to blossom into a city. The shipyards are no more, but where once workers flocked to the river at the sound of the shift whistle, they now commute to business parks, technology centres and manufacturing plants. Yet, despite all of this change, on the 11th day of the 11th month, the city stands still and silent, remembering the sacrifice of 2 world wars and honouring those that continue to leave from the Weir, destined for distant shores.